number 2. So now I'm going to be reading out to you my report, my second report, which I was intended doing in the first video, but then I went off on a tangent. So I was seen by a full multidisciplinary team because that's what I wanted to do in order to get fully, just because I needed it to be done properly. Even though I didn't have to, but I wanted to. And I remember we waited a little bit. It was in March 2009 because I got my first diagnostic report, the one I read out to you last week, in January of 2009, and I saw the full multidisciplinary team in March 2009. I remember that it took place at this psychiatric hospital, which had a kind of outreach unit, and that's where the autism team was based. I was really scared about going there on the train because at that point in time my OCD was really bad. In actual fact, now with the whole coronavirus thing, COVID-19, my OCD is about the same as it was back in 2009, possibly even worse, because that was the last time when I literally couldn't go out. But obviously now there's a genuine reason for that. Back then it was just because I had a really extreme OCD. So I couldn't go on the train or anything. And there was a bit of concern about how I was actually going to get there because I didn't really want to go into a taxi either. But then my dad managed to get a special cab to take me there because I can get a little bit like travel sick in like normal taxis. So he got a special minivan type taxi, and that also made me feel safer as well because I sometimes worry about like taxis crashing and stuff, which is another phobia I have about going in cars. And I thought because the like a little minivan, it was kind of more higher up. It feels safer. I don't know if it actually is safer, but it feels safer because it's like a bigger vehicle. So that's what so my dad went and ordered that specially for me, and it was a nice airy vehicle, and that relieved my anxiety quite considerably. But it was still stressful. So we went on this taxi ride when we could have got there on the train a lot cheaper, but you know. And then I remember, so it was actually a psychiatric hospital. It didn't feel like a psychiatric hospital at all, actually. The building looked more like a university campus, really. And it was quite kind of, it didn't feel like a psychiatric hospital. But I remember we had to wait in his waiting room for quite a while before we were seen. Again, what happened was a psychiatrist who's actually, I think he worked in learning disability services, but he specialised in autism. I went off to see him on my own in a room. And he talked to me, and then my mum and my dad were then interviewed by the speech and language therapist, a psychologist. Who else was there? Was it speech and language therapist, psychologist, and I also think clinical nurse specialist. The one who saw me on the first occasion, he was there as well. So they all went off. I don't know what they talked about because I wasn't there. I was just with the psychiatrist, and he talked to me for quite a long time. And then what happened was there was a break, so I went back with my parents into the waiting room again. There was no one else in the room, by the way, it's just us. While the people who'd done the assessment went off and talked and discussed it, and then we all regrouped and we all sat around a table, and that's when I was told that they looked at all the evidence and I definitely was autistic. And that was that. So I'm going to read to you this report now. So it says, Autistic Spectrum Disorder Asperger's Syndrome Assessment Clinic. Date seen, the 20th of the 3rd, 2009. Referral, initial screen carried out by clinical nurse specialist and referral to clinic for confirmation of diagnosis. Background, sources of information, a report by the clinical nurse specialist dated the 14th of the 1st, 2009. Educational psychology report dated the 9th of the 1st, 1998, that's one when I was at school, and interview and mental state evaluation 20th of the 3rd, 2009. So Anna lives with her brother and her parents. She describes a reasonable sibling relationship with her brother but a more confrontational relationship with her parents. She describes a preoccupation with dirt and contamination from the age of 6. She used to fold her arms to avoid contact with dirt in the environment. She always had a tendency to be intolerant of others. Intolerant sounds like I'm allergic or something. And this made groups and group activities difficult. Her problems in this regard were noted in her early days at school and persisted throughout her educational career. She was intolerant of noise and found busy social settings difficult. She has a significant discrepancy between her scores on verbal versus performance IQ testing. her VIQ being on the 63rd percentile and a PIQ on the 1st percentile. That I had my IQ test done again as an adult, so that would have changed because my verbal's even higher now than it was when I was a child. It's now in the like really superior range, kind of shot up really high. But my PIQ is still very low, not as low as when I was a child, but it has gone up, but not as much as the verbal. So there is still a gap, but actually the gap has increased, but it's because the verbal has like shot up. In line with these scores, she always found verbally based subjects relatively easy and practical subjects more difficult. In her schoolwork, she needed a structured approach and constant reminders to achieve her potential. Physical contact has always been difficult, and so sheltered play became self-centred, leading to social isolation. Her parents report she was quite boisterous and somewhat clumsy, but very difficult to comfort or console even when she hurt herself. It was noted that she had problems in cooperative, interactive and imaginative play. Current assessment. Anna has significant problems in day-to-day activities and accesses social facilitation from a support worker attached to the local CMHT. With this support, she could do her shopping and access the community. She works on a voluntary basis with a local autistic society, because I was doing voluntary work for them at the time, in a charity shop and in a local art gallery. In all these settings, she could work without much social contact, so can manage to complete her tasks. Anna describes a phobia in relation to uncontrolled settings and the possibility of contamination and an excessive personal contact, but on further discussion, this appeared to be an autistic preoccupation with order, predictability and control, rather than a classic phobia. So that's interesting, and I agree with this, but yeah, while I do have like obsessive compulsive like tendencies, I would say that they are very, very much interlinked with my autism. Although they're separate, because obviously not all autistic people have those particular fears, and that's obviously again because autism affects people in so many different ways. The way I experience it is very much bound up in my autism, in how autism affects me, as opposed to it being like a sort of classic case of OCD, if that makes sense. She has a need for routine and order in her environment, and this can extend to a reluctance to unwrap presents, as this creates a mess, but she does eventually manage to open and use the presents. She can become preoccupied about issues, and recently has been preoccupied with the actress Kate Winslet and with public health scares. And identifies that she takes things very literally and finds it difficult to put things in context or perspective. She has a desire for friends but needs her friendships to be exclusive, believing that if others are involved, her friendships will not survive. Yeah, I would say that even now, as an older adult, my desire for friends is even less than it was then, because I've had some bad experiences with it, and I've just come to think, I just can't be asked for that. Part of me still wants them, but kind of on a very kind of theoretical level, because it never really works in practice. Although she has always had a facility for language, she continues to have difficulty with metaphor, irony and satire. She has a tendency to literality and communication, and has to learn the meaning of proverbs in an academic rather than intuitive way. Mental state examination. Anna shows no evidence of psychosis or major mood disorder. While she has a diagnosis of probable OCD, this is probably autistic preoccupation. Her presentation is consistent with autistic spectrum disorder, and her scores on AQ and EQ would tend to confirm this. She has shown evidence of impairment of reciprocal social interaction since childhood. There is evidence of poorly developed theory of mind, impairment of social and interactive play, concrete and literal communication, egocentric preoccupations, ritualistic behaviours, need for order and routine, and significant impairment of social functioning due to the anxiety provoked by uncontrolled environments. In consequence of these symptoms, she is socially isolated and lacking in confidence, with low self-esteem and diminished sense of self-worth. Conclusions. Anna shows clear evidence of autistic spectrum disorder, and the appropriate approach to support is that outlined in the report, the one done by the clinical nurse specialist that I read out last time. Her obsessive symptoms are probably better explained as autistic preoccupation rather than obsessive compulsive disorder per se. I would agree with that. She has low self-esteem. He also recommends SSRIs. He actually says, given the phobic nature of her preoccupation, she might benefit for trial of an antidepressant with antiphobic properties such as an SSRI, but I've never been on anti-anxiety medication. I just don't want to go down that route. Even though I understand what others do, for me, it's just not for me. Anna's considerable verbal intelligence is not mirrored in her practical skills, and she struggles in many aspects of daily living and work, as she has motor coordination difficulties and difficulty initiating tasks or being proactive. For this reason, she needs supervision in many tasks. The impact of the two areas of her functioning being so different is very frustrating for Anna and those around her, as people assume that she should have a greater level of skill in practical tasks as she is so verbally intelligent. Recommendations. In addition to the specialist outreach support suggested, we discussed with Anna that it may be a good idea for her to start looking at moving on from her parents' home into some form of supported accommodation. So that's interesting because obviously I have achieved that goal because I now do live I live semi-independently. I still get a lot of support from my dad and from the local autism charities. Not so much at the moment because of this corona thing, mainly from my dad at the moment. But I do live pretty much independently other than that. So I have achieved that goal. And we seem to agree this would be a good idea, and it's hoped that this would help to remove some of the stress on her relationship with her parents as her preoccupations have less of an impact on them. And indeed it has. My dad's a lot less stressed, I'm a lot less stressed, so it's been really good. It says, clearly Anna would need significant support to live away from her family home. And I do get that support, as I said, from the local autism charity. She is most likely to benefit from support to live in her own accommodation rather than to share with others. Initial input to help her build structures and routine might help to reduce the amount of support she needs in the longer term. And has shown the ability to learn skills such as using a train when she can see a point to them as she's given the right support. An assessment of her activities of daily living would be helpful to inform support planning for such a move. And a CMHT might therefore consider a referral to an occupational therapist. I did have an occupational therapy report at one point, but it wasn't really that helpful, and I don't actually quite understand what it was trying to achieve, so I won't go into that, but that was not really very helpful. Anna has shown that she can be a useful and reliable employee if the environment and support are right, and she should continue to be encouraged to fill the role she has and learn skills in those environments. Putting pressure on Anna to move into less supported work too soon might increase anxiety, so a gradual process would suit her better. And that's the report. So that finishes that. And I have to say that, I've talked about this elsewhere, but I am basically unemployable because of my high levels of anxiety and like obsessive compulsive tendencies and all of that. I just can't do normal work because of the nature of my extreme anxiety and my problems being around people at the best of times with germs and contamination. And right now, that is just not even happening at all. But yeah, because of my OCD tendencies and my distractibility and my problems, just in general sense, organising myself and being around people just unfortunately makes me unemployable in a conventional sense. But I do try and, as much as possible, obviously I can't do it at the moment because of Corona, but I do as much as possible try and do voluntary activities because they're a lot more flexible and I don't have to go in every day. And then if I do get triggered by OCD, it's not like I'm going to get fired or anything. So I try and do that as much as I can, but it's very difficult not being able to work conventionally. That is something I really struggle with, and again I've had to come to terms with it because it's something that has resulted in a lot of guilt and beating myself up, feeling like I can't function like normal. But you have to come to terms with it, don't you? That's an ongoing process. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed me reading out to you my diagnosis report, and do let me know what you think in the comments box below. So thank you for watching.